Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the monthly webinar by Diaspora Innovation Institute, the Environment subgroup. Today, the topic for our monthly series of webinar is on climate change, our myth, our reality, and our action. And we're so fortunate to have with us today, Mr. Peter Taiwo, who is the managing partner at ADMAGS Environmental Services, and he'll be the key speaker today. We also have Prince Akinwale Ojomo, who is the CEO and founder of the Diaspora Innovation Institute, based both in the US and in Africa. And we also have our commentator today in the person of Mr. Tarique J. Rashaud, who is joining us from Houston, Texas. So thank you all. Welcome to the program. And first of all, let me even say happy Thanksgiving to those of you joining us from the US. Today, November 24, 2022. Thursday is Thanksgiving Day in the US. And, I wish you and your families, a warm and happy Thanksgiving. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over to Prince Akinwale, who will be introducing the guest speaker, and we'll continue the discussion from there on climate change, the myth, reality, and our action. Prince Akinwale, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Remi. Alapo. I must really commend you for this commitment to this monthly meeting. And if you go back to the history line, I think we've been doing this. This is the second year running. Actually, it came out of post-COVID, right? So, and I must really commend you for this commitment and how we are able to really take this in the diaspora level. And of course, today, which is actually a very important day, is talking about climate change. We all actually have been watching, spending almost a whole month in Egypt, trying to figure out what is the solution. And of course, at the Diaspora Innovation Institute as well, we do not have any exception to talk to the guru and to the professional in this area to educate us on this. So that's why we are actually introducing someone today who I've known for over almost 12 years right now. When I first came to Nigeria, and we've been in the trenches together. And he's been consistently working in the area of environment and climate change, especially in Lagos, where we both met in Lagos. So without much ado, I'm going to introduce, I call him an erudite scholar, a professor for that matter, a very staunch environmentalist, and a very consistent person in this space over a period of time. Mr. Professor Peter Taiwo, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you, sir. Dr. Akinwale and everybody here on board, I want to thank you. And I hope that this conversation can bring the needed energy to the global dialogue on climate change in general, and in particular, what Nigeria needs to do to become a credible partner of that dialogue. That's what we're here for.
So essentially, I think without much ado, we will have interaction and ask some questions regarding where we are with this. And like Dr. Alapo mentioned, our focus is what are the myths around this climate change and environment. A lot of people come, some professors, some erudite scholars, they come with different theories. So we can talk about our myths. What are the myths that has been ongoing? So we can talk about those ones first, right? So that we can lay a credible foundation into what our reality will be and eventually our action. So, Professor, let's talk about the myths, the different myths around climate change. Is it real, or is it like is it a myth?
Very real, sir. And let's not kid ourselves about it. we are seeing some real-time effects. We're seeing snow in places where we shouldn't see snow by this time of year. We are seeing warm weather. We are seeing flooding. We are seeing devastation. So I think that even the United States, that was a couple of years ago, foot dragging in this thing, has now woken up to the reality that this is real. So I just want to use that to say this is in fact for real.
Thank you so much. So obviously, I know all countries, including African countries now, are actually figuring out and ensuring that we go above what is it's called the myth right now. So like you mentioned, Professor, that even in the United States, the European countries and even African countries right now are coming to the table with what is going on and how they will be able to find solutions. So I think the next question is, so what are the realities? And you mentioned that, where some location, they were in no snow, but now all of a sudden we see some snowfall. So let's expand more, and that's even beyond weather, right? Talking about our agriculture. So let's expand more on this and our realities. Professor.
Yes, sir. I think the wake-up call for a lot of people came when, after that tsunami in Japan, I hope we all remember that incident several years ago.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. After that tsunami, the debris from Japan took 3 months to come ashore in California. And that was when everybody woke up to the fact that environmental pollution knows no boundaries. So what happens in Japan can actually impact the United States in such a short time span. So if there were some, God forbid, chemical compromise from Japan that washed up in the United States, it'd be right there. There'd be no missile detector. There'd be no this and this and that advanced military intervention to catch it. I think that's when everybody now woke up to the fact that this thing we're talking about is for real. So what am I saying in effect? Pollution that occurs in Japan impacts Nigeria and the United States and everywhere else at almost the same time. So this was one, the world now agreed almost reluctantly that if you reduce pollution in one area of the world, it is to the credit of the rest of the world.
So, Mr. Peter, I have a question for you. Thank you so much for what you shared with us. What are some countries doing to ensure that, some of the myth that many people may be, thinking is about climate change, and we're seeing the realities of pollution and carbon emissions and oil spillage everywhere. In many locations, the weather, it's changing dramatically, where, Prince Akinwale mentioned there's some locations where it never used to snow and then it's snowing all of a sudden. There are other places
Right.
where by this time of the year, the streets, they're covered in snow, but we still have sort of like summer weather. Me in particular, I live in New York, and I know that over 20 years ago at this time on Thanksgiving Day, the entire New York City will be covered in snow. But right now, I can go out with just a sweater, and we're talking end of November. Of course,
Wow.
I do love the warm weather, but is it something we should be scared about, that climate change is more of a reality and hitting us than we are thinking about it?
Very, very correct, sir. And let me step out of my way here for just a minute. to put a caveat in what you have just said. In the next 10 years, it might not be absurd as it is to think of right now that we're going to experience a phenomenon called climate migration, where people from parts of the world that have been rendered unlivable will now be looking to migrate to other parts of the world that have not been so seriously impacted, or parts of the world that have managed to manage climate change effects and impacts. That's a very, very possible reality, because there are parts of the world where we're living now that just may not be habitable in the next 10 years.
Can you provide some of those locations? I know I read something a while back that Bangladesh in the next maybe 10 years or less may be submerged completely in water.
Yes, yes, sir. And there are parts on the islands, especially like Bahamas and a lot of the Caribbean and places that are low-lying, because the most visible impact of all of this is the volume of water from the ice melt, from the glaciers, pouring out into the oceans. And if you can imagine that volume of water and the turbulence is going to create, it is just going to completely submerge a lot of these low-lying islands that are currently habitable, and also parts of the United States, parts of Cuba, parts of Florida. So it is a very, very real phenomenon.
Wow, very scary. So what are some well, before I ask what some suggestions to tackle this climate change crisis, I wanted to bring Mr. Rajid. I don't know if he's still here. He was here a few moments ago. I mean, Mr. Tarique Rashaud. I'm sorry about mispronouncing your name. I know you work in the energy sector in Houston. Can you share with us from the perspective of, the ongoing energy crisis that we're currently experiencing around the globe, especially since maybe about February of this year with the crisis with Ukraine and Russia, and the energy, the gas, skyrocketing. But do you think it's only because of, the conflict with Ukraine and Russia, or this has to do more with climate change, or, the, opportunity out there for energy companies to conserve and preserve and find new ways in supplying energy across different cities?
Oh, absolutely. Now, thank you for that question. What Dr. Taiwo said was really spot on. First, as far as the myth, I'll tell you from my perspective. You noted, sitting here in Houston, Texas, you have a lot of opinions where there isn't an intersection between climate change and some of the things that we're seeing on the ground. But there's one key example to all the detractors that were here in Texas that proved that to be wrong. A year and a half ago, I want to say it was in February, we had what was called Winter Storm Uri. And I'm sure if you guys know anything about Texas, I mean, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
But that was a kind of a highlight and an underscore that something is going on. And this is that happened maybe 6 months right after BlackRock stated that climate risk is investment risk. And then finally, we started to see these companies start take notice, because it was going to be tied to their pocket and their risk profile and investment. And this is why this is important. The other thing that was very aptly noted by the good doctor a second ago is that this climate change is going to impact not only the food not only energy, but water as well. And that's why we really kind of concentrate on that food, water, energy nexus. And I want to tie that back to your question a second ago, Dr. Alapo. What we're seeing in the Ukraine is that I want to say it's maybe a trailing indicator, because when we have that conflict in the midst of a food security issue that was already going on due to climate change, because of drought, because of these changes in climate, because of less availability of clean water, et cetera. It just accentuated the issue because, of course, Ukraine was one of the biggest providers across the world for fertilizer. And now you have that coupled with what's going on across the nation and across all the nation for food security. You have an issue where it became strained, but that's where there's an opportunity. And I think Dr. Taiwo, being an environmentalist, really probably knows this. It gives us an opportunity in some of our actions with climate change to go toward more sustainable practices, more sustainable land management, not use so much synthetic fertilizers, but go to green fertilizers. So all of a sudden you have an opportunity to really kind of meet the problem with an opportunity of a solution. But I tell you, when Dr. said, even some places in the United States are going to feel some of these issues with climate change. I grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, which is right on the coast. One, we have environmental issues, but two, we are steadily hit with hurricanes. Same like you mentioned with some of the small island states. We can learn from each other because we're going to share the same types of issues in erosion, in losing land, and having these climatic events that's wiping out really hard to reach and really disparately impact the communities as it is. So climate change is real. Now in energy, this is what we're doing. This is what we can do. What we can do is transition from some of these normally combustion-based power generation, be it combined cycle power plants and things like that. And you're seeing more shifts in investment toward solar power, toward hydropower and modular hydropower. Toward even conversion of plastics to energy. And the reason why that's important is, just said it, when you have these events, these plastics and pollution rush up on the shores, either we're going to take a siloed approach and just recycle in a silo, or we can try to convert some of these plastics into energy. So these are some of the I want to say a bulk of where you see the investment monies going in the energy industry to make sure we go to a more circular economy and hopefully really impact and meet this challenge head on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tarique Rashaud, for sharing. I'm going to bring Mr. Peter Taiwo back on because before we started the program, we were informally discussing where he was right now. He mentioned he just came out of a meeting on, a specific meeting relating to, energy crisis and oil spillage. And, he's based in Nigeria. And of course, many of us know the problem with, oil spillage in the Delta areas, the southeastern part of Nigeria, and the problem it's created for the indigenes in those communities. It's affected their livelihood. The rivers are all, like polluted. There's, they cannot cultivate food on their farms. And, breathing wise, I'm sure there's a lot of, lung infections and asthma, and, any other, probably health challenges relating to soot in the air and lack of visibility because of the oil, the gas flaring. So I wanted Mr. Taiwo to, speak a little bit about the meeting he said he went to this morning or this afternoon in Nigeria, and some of the ongoing challenges of climate change in Nigeria and what can be done, what is being done, and what we can do as part of our collective action. Mr. Taiwo.
Thank you, Doc. Very timely, and we need to have this conversation. First of all, with regards to carbon emissions in a general sense, we have the Kyoto Protocol, which is what is globally used to calculate emission volumes, but it does not specify.
Mr. Taiwo, I think you've
Specifically addressed the problem with that.
Okay, good.
That Nigeria and in places like Lagos, metropolitan areas that have a lot of people living close together, particulate matter emission from petroleum products, especially diesel, are probably more harmful than the carbon emissions themselves, because they impact human beings directly in a way that carbon emissions impacts indirectly. I hope I'm clear on that. Hello?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. If I can,
I hope I'm clear on that.
Yes.
Then now moving on. The problem with pollution, Doc, as you have mentioned in the Niger Delta and all of that, arises from a myriad of problems, and we can talk about them all day till we're blue in the face. But at the heart of the matter is that the Nigerian government did not do what was done in the United States in places like Louisiana, where oil was first discovered. They moved the populations out of that Louisiana area, moved them into schools, established a healthy environment for them, just so that the oil producing areas will be as least inhabited as possible. That is not the case in Nigeria. In Nigeria, oil installations exist actually in the backyards of communities, such that the slightest disruption in terms of an accident can severely impact a cross-section of the population. That's one. Secondly, the amount of surveillance and security of apparatuses that is required is not employed in Nigeria. The resulting effect you have underlined: devastation, land use, deprivation, agricultural meltdown. People cannot use their farms or their space or their running water and all of that. The important thing, I think, for us is that in a country like Nigeria, and this is what the COP conference that's been going on, or that just wound up in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, is seeking to address, is that countries like Nigeria, instead of coming to the table to say, give us money for climate change, can actually outline to the global community what effects and impacts climate change is having on Nigeria, so that way you can make a credible case for what remedies you are asking for and how you plan to be held accountable for the resources allotted for those remedies entrusted to you. I hope I'm clear on that. So as we talk about climate change and sustainability, especially for sub-Sahara, it is important, I believe, that we start from there. One of the issues that was raised at this COP conference is the greening of gas. As far as Nigeria is concerned, Nigeria actually has more gas than oil. And that gas has been largely untapped and unused. What we are now saying is that gas is a cleaner fuel than petroleum derivatives. And as such, if we are allowed to transition to gas first and get credit for it before we now move on to solar and EV and all of that, that will give us the platform to actually now begin the process of abatement of emissions. Because we cannot go from grass to grace in one generation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taiwo. I believe Mr. Rashaud wanted to add to your comments. Please go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't mind, and thanks for that, Dr. Taiwo. Spot on again. As a matter of fact, I was able to engage with some of the Nigerian leadership in Miami, just leading to COP27. And those are some of the things I talked about as well, because just kind of give you a profile, the city I grew up in is extremely similar to, very analogous to Nigeria. Port Arthur, Texas is a refinery town. Some of the similar challenges. I grew up not only right next to the fence line, my brothers probably labored and built half the fence line. So when you start talking about, very appropriately, PM 2.5 effects, the health effects from nitrous oxides, that can be extremely impactful and disparately impactful to the surrounding communities. And the huge opportunity that I did kind of bring forward was that going to liquefy LNG, compressed renewable natural gas. Because overnight, I think it's not realistic and I think it's unfair to think that developing countries are going to flip a switch and go to all solar, or flip a switch and go to all renewables. From a technological feasibility standpoint, that's not reasonable, nor do I think it's reasonable from a financial standpoint. I think the quickest way is to take stepping stones when we talk about energy. And those stepping stones are to go to the lower emissions natural gas. But also, there's also opportunity. This is something I took an opportunity to bring up as well, was capturing some of that flaring, capturing the flaring, turning that to boiled water via the RNG process for small steam turbines, and those capstone turbines that can capture that methane, et cetera, to generate power. Because the amount of flaring in Nigeria, as far as the energy loss, we're talking energy loss, not in addition to the health effects, but energy loss was to the tune of $425 million US in 2018. That could have been captured and converted to energy, in addition to avoiding all those negative effects on the environment. So I think these are some of the opportunities we have for knowledge transfer, knowledge sharing between some of the things that we're doing, like you brought up in Louisiana, which was maybe 15 minutes from where I grew up in Texas. You capturing those gases, converted to lower emissions energy, making sure you have the least disparate impact on the surrounding communities by better planning, and take a marked approach and kind of collaborate, bilaterally, so we can share some of what we saw that worked on this end, some best practices that can be deployed in places like Nigeria, Kenya, and others. I just want to add that to your comment. I agree 100%.
Thank you so much.
And
yes.
Doc, can you permit me to interrupt for just a minute?
Sure.
Because I want to back up what Tarique just said. I think we need to understand gas flaring. What happens is that when you drill for oil, what comes out of the ground is not just oil, but a combination of everything in that bed. It includes water, gas, sometimes mud, rocks, and everything. And there is no pump or pumping system underground that brings all of this to the surface. It has to come to the surface on its own strength. So that is why the geologists will always look for a place in the formation where the pressure is so high or high enough to bring what is in that formation to the surface. I hope I'm not, I hope I'm clear on that. So pretty much what happens is that when you now drill and all that stuff starts bubbling to the top, if you don't do something with the gas right away, the oil and the rest of the stuff that is behind the gas will not flow. So what Nigeria and a lot of other places do is they simply light a match and the gas catches fire. And as the gas is dispensed, the stuff behind the gas comes to the surface. So, Tarique, please, I want us to create the right impression. It's not like Nigeria is simply just burning gas for the hell of it. It's just that they're in such a hurry to get to the oil and sell that they don't care about monetizing the gas, because gas is a lot more difficult to harness, capture, and ship to market.
Absolutely, absolutely. Agreed 100%, Dr. Taiwo, and definitely, I definitely understand that process, and I tell you, but and kind of along those lines, I stand as kind of very encouraged that when I look at, comparatively, some of the ideas and push toward making a better impact. The Nigeria flare gas commercialization program, I think, has promise on two vectors. One, like you said, if we're able to capture some of that, that's one to monetize for the benefit of Nigeria, and of course the ability to reduce some of those effects environmentally. But the other thing I'm encouraged about as well is COP27 did a couple of things. Maybe we all didn't highlight some of the challenges as good as we should. And I know the US definitely didn't. But I think, and I like your opinion on this, I think at least now we're getting the eyes that on this issue that needs to be on this issue, and not just from a myopic view of, okay, this is what can happen. But I think now finally we're looking at what impact that's going to have if we don't get beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade in impact. What is that going to have to the smallholder farmer? What is that going to have on impoverished communities? And from the U.S., just being honest, a lot of our activities are hurting some of those that aren't in the don't have the capabilities to immediately switch and protect themselves. So we should share some of the brunt in engagement to make sure we're engaged to correct some of that. Make sure we flow monies toward areas that are being impacted, because as you said earlier, pollution that happens here doesn't stay here. The pollution that happens here goes to other places that had nothing to do with producing as many of these nitrous oxides, et cetera. So I'm hoping if one thing does come out of COP, Doc, is more collaboration, more bilateral collaboration, and hopefully the diaspora will be involved bilaterally in some of these solutions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rashaud. You mentioned something very important that caught my attention. As part of civil society, working on, the plight of women worldwide, and, trying to alleviate the conditions of women who are often affected by issues such as climate change. Because we know in many communities around the world, especially in, the indigenous populations, women are the ones who suffer the most in terms of, trying to produce, food, in agricultural production, in fetching water or getting water, or, having to walk miles, and, just so many things that, climate change has, negatively impacted women around the world. So I wanted to, find out from you. You mentioned that a lot of the production that takes place in places such as the US, they don't stay here. They are, like shipped or taken to other communities, and many communities will gladly accept these raw waste or whatever just for money. Mr. Taiwo also mentioned that instead of investing, government is investing heavily in gas, which is cleaner. They want to get first to the, just get the oil and sell for quick gains. Because of the situation and the inequality, gender inequality around the world, women suffer a lot. Most times, we see that, of course, whether educated or most times uneducated women in the communities, because they need to feed their families, they will go at any length. They don't care whether it's raw sewage or whatever kind of ways that may cause future, health hazard, health risk, or environmental hazard. But the solution, immediate solution, is that they need to put food on the table. They need to feed themselves, their children. So they will accept a lot of these, environmental waste in their own backyards. At the same time, they will also participate in tapping petrol so that they can sell, in the quick black market and make some money. At the same time, we're finding out that in terms of food production, a lot of the the oil spillage has affected farmlands, waters, and women who would usually collect food for their families are unable to do so. Also, there's a higher number of health risks or health factors that affect women in, when they give birth. It's, in to abnormal children because of the environmental or the, other hazards from climate change. What are your comments on some of these ways the, gender inequality aspect of climate change and the way it continues to affect women around the world? Not only Nigeria. I know that the Diaspora Innovation webinar series is focused on the collaborations of Nigerians in the diaspora and Nigerians in Nigeria to harness brain power to work collaboratively on improving the climate or the environment. When I say climate, it doesn't mean climate in terms of weather, but, to harness, opportunities for one another. So, but I want you to talk in general, and if you have specific examples of Nigeria, you can also share them with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. And I always like to talk about, these two things. One, as you nailed it, the challenge with climate change is multimodal, and it's going to require multimodal and collaborative solutions. But some of the key modalities and challenges on that side is the impact that we're seeing disparately, unfortunately, on women, on underrepresented populations, the youth that's not really being targeted and talked about in the past, and students as well. Now, this is general. I'm speaking U.S. We're seeing this worldwide, but that also gives us an opportunity because of that multimodality. Because of that multimodality of these challenges, we have to bring in a wider tent to really talk and discuss of what the best, most impactful solutions would be. And women's voices they must be at the table more. And here's the opportunity. Because of the financial markets that's being developed around the climate change projects, for instance, whether it be renewable energy, LNG projects to more cleaner projects, sustainable land management projects for agriculture, and this is talking U.S., Nigeria, everywhere, that goes under, let's say, Vera BCS standards or CDM standards. Based on the impacts and changes that are done on those ground levels, there's an opportunity for carbon credits to be generated. Those carbon credits, if they're generated, they can be converted to offsets. Now, why is that important? To reduce the carbon footprint of some of the major polluters here in the US, Europe, Africa, they're gonna have to do two things. They're gonna have to switch to operations, but in the short term, they're gonna have to offset their footprint by purchasing these carbon credits. Now, the way that we can really make an impact and make sure women, children, et cetera, students are involved is make sure some of that monetization of those offsets in the form of carbon credits go back to ESG projects that focus on impacting women, children, those not normally involved. And we're seeing this in the US. If you have a project that you engage in and it has this larger amount of impact, targeting gender and removing some of those gender disparities, now all of a sudden the monetization has a higher value. So what that does is incentivizes, for instance, the Shells, the Chevrons, et cetera, to engage in projects here in the US, in communities like I grew up in, communities in Nigeria, communities in Kenya, Taiwan, wherever you have it, where you're gonna have that impact, a tangible impact on that population, that gender population that you're focusing on. And that's in the form of education, funding the education, that's in form of making that social economics, that's in form of building SMEs, small, medium enterprises for women, et cetera. And these are some of the things I talked about at COP. The good thing is, unfortunately, you're going to have some companies that's going to overstate what they're going to do as far as these impacts, and their hand has been slapped over the last year by the SEC, FCC, and been fined. So now these companies, they go out and say, we want a tangible way to know that we're making these impacts in Nigeria or in Port Arthur, Texas, and they have to be proven. So now their foot is to the fire. So the good thing is on that end is we come up with a way to say, and this is what it's going to take. It's going to take organizations like this to represent and give voice to the voiceless and make sure you say, okay, you say you're going to come in my area, you're going to come here and do this project, outline to us tangibly how this will impact us along the socioeconomics, along the lines of reducing pollution, along the lines of reducing gender disparity. That has to be outlined before you come here and engage in our communities. But it's going to take opportunities for organizations like this to keep everybody honest and make sure someone speaks for those people. And that's what the opportunity that we see here in the US. And thankfully, more teeth is behind that now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rashaud. Mr. Taiwo, do you have anything to add, please?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I'd like to break it down a little bit, Rashaud. You know, he makes all the points, and I believe he's just trying to cover a lot of space in a short period of time.
Yeah, man. I'm trying, brother.
But I think it's important for us
so
to
much
slow
work to be done in such a little span of time.
Yes, ma'am. So we got to slow him down so we are all on the same page. So Rashid, sir, here's my thing. Number one, I think we need to understand what CERs are. These are carbon emission reduction certificates. In other words, if you reduce the amount of carbon your business or your household emits and you can quantify it, the international community says, if you show that to us and you quantify it, it is worth this amount of money. Rashaud, is that so, sir?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so that becomes a CER. So the CER is based on tonnage. So 1 ton of carbon emissions reduction, at my last check was selling about $25.
Right.
I'm not sure what it is today, but
Yeah,
anyway.
From between 15 and 20. But if it has that ESG component, it can bump up to about 30.
Okay, so if a company like Coca-Cola says, I want to reduce my carbon footprint, that means I want to reduce the amount of emissions my business activities puts out. So the first thing they would do is engage in what we call abatement. In other words, they will look at their machines and processes that make these emissions and make sure they are optimized to make as little as possible. That's the first step. Then the second step is for those emissions that they cannot absolutely do anything about, they are allowed to go to anywhere in the world and engage in an emission reduction program, quantify the amount of emissions in that program, document it, and then apply it to their bottom line. And that is what we call net zero. Is that so, sir? Rashaud?
Yes, that's one of the net zero pathways. Direct impact, or in the short term, like we're speaking of, through carbon emissions credits that can be monetized if it's proven according to the CDM or Vera methodology. Right
exactly.
on. You're right on.
So what we're saying is, if Coca-Cola comes to Nigeria and engages, for example, or let's just make it Kenya, any other country, not Nigeria, and engages in a carbon emissions reduction program, they want to take those credits and apply to their own emissions such that volume of those credits would be subtracted from their own to where they are at zero. That's what's in it for them. Now, it is up to a country like Nigeria to now say, for this money that Coca-Cola is bringing to Nigeria for this carbon abatement, we want to see how that money is allotted across the board. So if Nigeria has an inventory of its carbon production, in other words, where is Nigeria's carbon emissions coming from? Is it coming from deforestation? Is it coming from gas flaring? Is it coming from diesel? With all of these businesses in Nigeria using generators and all of that, you can now specify how the emissions is accumulated, and now you can spread the money across these fields of emissions. The reason I think that is important is because, Doug, you talk about gender equality and all of this. I just came back from a place near Port Harcourt 2 weeks ago, where I observed a woman with a child strapped to her back, scooping spilled crude oil from the river, filling it in polythene bags to sell at the crude oil illegal market. And you know, when you look at that woman trying to put food on the table today, and also depriving herself of the ability to put food on the table tomorrow, you now have to wonder to yourself, where is the breaking point? So in the programs that we have done, especially in oil-bearing communities, we have found out that if you put 100 naira in a woman's hand and put 100 naira in a man's hand. The 100 naira you put in a man's hand goes to probably 2 other ameliorates. What I mean by that is it goes to help maybe 1 or 2 people. The first being the man's girlfriend, and the other being, okay, let me stay away from that. The same, hang on, the same $100 you put in a woman's hand goes into 5 ameliorates. In other words, she would take 10 naira of that money for her sister, another 10 for her brother, another 40 for her husband and his family, and then her. So the point I am making is every 100 naira you put in a woman's hands, you benefit 5 other people. And we're very clear on that with what we have found. The challenge is for a country like Nigeria, first, to understand its carbon inventory, to say where are the sources of emissions, and then apply these funds that you generate from international intervention to those specific sources of pollution. I hope I'm clear on what I've just said.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. And that literature, that finding regarding the multiplying effect of empowering women, the literature shows that. I've seen similar. I mean, so I know you backed off from saying how we don't manage our men, we don't manage it as well. Hey man, the truth is the truth. you can't get around it. You can't get around it. The truth is the truth. But I tell
I'm pointing the finger at myself as well. So
yeah, but I tell you that I love this conversation because it's so timely. Because one thing I did note and kind of nudge when I Honorable Femi, I'm going to say the name wrong. Agriledger. I say the name wrong all the time. I think Femi. I'm sorry. Yeah, the last name I can't say it so well. Is that opportunity to do those things you're talking about?
Yeah,
Dr. Taiwo, because and I'm speaking from where some of the polluters from that lens is that they are coming for carbon projects in Nigeria. They are going to try to engage in the projects for the soil organic carbon, for nature-based projects, for agriculture at the intersection for agroforestry, but they're also going to look for the renewable energy credits, et cetera, that are generated as part of the Vice President's initiative for the just energy transition. But
I want to tell you though,
we're going to have to make sure that the community gets the return from the shells and everyone for that impact. And it's going to take organizations like this to make sure that return comes back to where it's been generated. I'm sorry I cut you off, Dr. Taiwo.
Exactly. I was just going to add, sir, that I don't want to brag about it, but the diaspora stands to gain immensely from the political dialogue going on in Nigeria currently. 2 leading presidential candidates have approached an organization that I'm affiliated with, asking for direction. And we have made it clear to the 2 parties that with respect to oil and gas, Rashaud, and monetizing these things we're talking about, the key is nodal gas development.
Yes, distributed.
Because
yes.
we have an abundance of gas and we're flaring it. But if we're able, and the reason we're flaring it is because we don't have gas pipelines in these areas that oil is produced. So a lot of times the gas is stranded. And with the gas stranded and you don't have anything to do with it, you have no option but to flare it. So if you now do a nodal gas development, that allows you to attract investment to build a city or a community in that particular area, because you don't have pipeline, it's going to take you 20 years of construction and God knows how much investment to buy pipes, dig pipes, lay them just to carry the gas out. So instead of doing that, and you just put a community around that facility. You supply that facility with 24-hour electricity. That will attract businesses to that community. That will attract workers to that community. That will attract taxes, investment. So in all of this, if it happens that way, we can now even piggyback on the green money. That's why we're calling for the greening of gas in Nigeria, so that that money can be utilized to bring these nodal cities up. And in that way, you wouldn't have to flare gas, you wouldn't have to spend money building pipelines, but you grow the economy and you grow the population away from urban centers. I hope we don't miss that point.
Man, I agree 100%. I mean, I literally made a proposal that included exactly what you're speaking of, because what we saw in Texas when electricity first deregulated, everyone tried the heavy-handed approach. But as the years pass, and as we sit now, everything is moving toward more distributive energy. And the reason is, when it's distributed, to your point, more distributive and nodal, then that heavy amount of CapEx required for that infrastructure is greatly reduced. Then you can help build up communities around the energy impoverished areas where they normally lack this type of resources. You can build communities around it. Now all of a sudden you build an economic stream. Now you can bring in people, and another great part of what you suggested is pipelining, and that gives the opportunity to attract more private global investment to Nigeria, especially with the conversation that's going on now. I mean, it's so aligned with what recent conversations and proposals. It's amazing. And can I ask you, have you engaged with the current administration with Nigeria and with some of these great ideas?
Did you say the current administration? All right. No, well,
I'll leave it alone, man.
no, sir. No. We can talk about it. Listen, I did not engage with the current. I engaged with the prospective.
Okay.
Yeah, two of the candidates who are seeking the office, and they were very, they were very welcoming, because Rash, a lot of these things we take for granted that people understand, but they really don't.
Yeah, no, you're right.
They really don't. So you got to go back to the bottom line and explain what a carbon credit is, explain what carbon footprint is, explain abatement, explain net zero, because as I speak to you,
the whole nine, yeah.
Yes, Nigeria does not have a carbon registry. In other words, you cannot come.
I think you are frozen, Mr. Taiwo.
To Nigeria and say, oh, emissions. Oh, no. There is no framework for calculating that. Oil and gas, how much emissions? No framework. So this is what I was trying to push Diaspora to do, to engage with the Minister of Environment and that structure to say, look, the international community, we can't even go to them to say, allow us into this protocol, unless we say, we know what is happening, we know how much emissions we're making, we know where they're coming from, and here are our propositions for abatement. Then the international community can now partner with you and align with you on that vision. Otherwise, you're just going hand in cap in hand, asking for money that is unsustainable. Nobody will give you that kind of money unless they know exactly where the money is going and for what anticipated effects.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taiwo, and also Mr. Rashaud, for sharing with us. You know, we can sit here for the next 5 hours talking about climate change. There's so much more to do, so much that each of our collective action is yearning for. And I wanted to try to round up by bringing Prince Akinwale to the floor, and for him to talk a little bit of the COP27 event in Egypt, because earlier he had mentioned something about a post that someone sent to him this morning. So would you like to comment on that, Prince Akinwale? If you're able to unmute. All right. So whenever you're able to unmute, you can join us back. I wanted to also call our attention that the issue of climate change is part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and for the 2030 agenda that many governments have committed to do something about climate change, to include climate change policies in their national agenda. And the Sustainable Development Goal 13 is specifically on climate change, climate action. And this is real. It's a reality that places around the world are very affected by one climate change issue or another, be it from environmental factors, the weather, food production, gas flaring, or petroleum spillage, just so much, the weather, where in some communities, it's beginning to snow, and in others, it's still sunny as if we're in the summer. So I hope that each and every one of us will continue to do our part, whether it's in the way we, collect garbage or throw refuse out or recycle. One thing or another, we have to do collectively, in support of ensuring or reducing climate change around our communities. So I see Lady K from University of Dominica. Lady K, would you like to share some comments on climate change, if it's a myth, a reality, and our collective action? Of course, both Mr. Taiwo and Mr. Rashaud have, given us a lot of reality, or shared a lot of the realistic, actions, or, of what's going on in terms of climate change. If you have any comments, we'll be happy to hear from you. Lady K. All right, I'm going to invite Prince Akinwale to the floor. Prince Akinwale, I called on you because earlier, before we started the recording, you were talking about the COP27 meetings in Egypt, and how instead of moving forward, it seems that many countries or governments are moving backward in the issue on climate change, which under the 2030 UN agenda the Sustainable Development Goal 13, which climate change, of course, is goal number 13. Many governments committed to ensuring that they lower carbon emissions or reduce carbon emissions, and also implement policies to change the way that climate change is affecting everyone in within their respective communities. Please, would you like to add anything on that matter?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry about that. I was like in a swap to be able to connect again. And yes, back to the issue of the big meeting in Egypt. As a matter of fact, the group of people who are in Egypt, as it were, has been able to create a system on how things should be. And to us, who are actually either in and out of the meeting, we believe that we should be able to lead by example. And a friend of mine who put one of the very, I think it's a joke actually, whereby a lot of people came into Egypt with a private jet, and they are telling people to use bicycle or to use bike. So that is the joke on the people. So the most important thing is that what do we do at our own local level? All said and done. So what do we do at our own local level? Again, that's the most important thing right now. So to us, I think we should be able to now create an ecosystem that will ensure that we, as a people, wherever we are, we should be able to create simple solutions. And one of the solutions that I talk about, or it's interesting, is how do we start planting trees, right? So, and that can be in high school projects. And imagine if all the high schools in the state, in Nigeria, in all the African countries, start just planting trees or having students to plant trees on their birthday. That will go a long way, even though it's very small, but on the aggregate, it can go into millions of engagement or tree planting program. So I guess the bottom line is, aside from the scientists, the big guys like Professor Peter Tarique, my own solution is just so pretty simple, right? Let me plant a tree. So if you can do the incremental that area, then of course, we're talking about carbon emission, all those big technical stuff, there could be a way to be able to tie them in, So, and I was actually listening to the professionals, and like, we need to take this gospel to the state governments, right? So it's always good to talk about this in a bigger level, but some of the state governments need the responsibilities to be able to make sure that if things happen, for instance, the flood that happened in Kogi State, right? Whereby even houses, for days, for weeks, are inhabitable. So we need to really let them know that all those things is no more acceptable. They need to take responsibility. And taking responsibility means that they need to really do things that will be able to really impact, in a very incremental way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prince Akinwale. If there are any more comments from Mr. Rashaud or Mr. Taiwo, we can round up with your final comments on action, collective action, what to do next in achieving, the 2020 agenda, putting SDG goal number 13 on climate action into the forefront, and what we can do in our collective communities, businesses, places of employment, or in our organizations, or even at the individual level. What can we do starting in our homes? So let's take maybe a minute or two each to round up with that. So I will call on Mr. Rashaud.
Yes, and thanks for that, Dr. Alapo. Yeah, if we go from microcosm level, up to macro, here at home, the individual, is two things we can do as far as one, action, and there's one other is vigilant. As far as action, there's things we can do, and I want to say that Brother Prince, he alluded to it. If you look at the McDonald's approach, it's not very, very, very a bad approach, because where the children go, the parents normally follow. And if you look at the youth today, they are very activated and very energized around this climate issue. If we engage them as far as recycling, engage them on how important climate action is, engage them on how to talk this conversation, give them vernacular to talk about it in the home. The parents will get to that, and it will affect the way the parents vote, will affect the way the parents push legislators to make sure the right things are done for their future. It's not just simple. I think, just putting in a recycling can. Yeah, that's nice. But if we really change for a paradigm shift, give them the information on that school level to understand what some of these solutions are, because this is where the future is going to come. These future solutions, I would love to say we have the answers. You see this gray hair, but these youngsters, they are light years past us when it comes to technology. And to really get there, Doctor, we're going to have to leverage technology to get there quicker. Now let's just step it back on the other side as far as action. If we do start with things that are within reach first, sometimes that low hanging fruit, we can grab a lot of those, but that mid-level fruit that's a little bit beyond reach, we grab those. Now we can make a huge impact. And that is that mid-level is what we're doing right now. Find a way to engage bilaterally across the diaspora, so that the things that you guys know, share with me, I share it and impact it here in the US. And that knowledge sharing that we have here with some best practices, share with the diaspora bilaterally for impact there. So I think it's going to take collaboration, and I think it's going to be engaging those that are normally not engaged quick enough. And that's along gender and along age and along youth, to give them the technology that they need. And
thank you so much.
And I want to say
Rashaud.
thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate the invitation.
You're most very highly welcome. I'll now call on Mr. Taiwo to give us his concluding remarks, or his
Yes, ma'am.
call to action remarks.
First, we start with ourselves and think about, is this thing important enough to us as individuals? And if the answer is yes, and we are convinced of that answer, what practical things are we going to set out to do? Just like Prince Akinwale intimated, if it is to plant a tree or whatever. I know that sounds sort of mundane, but importantly, we have to understand the conversation. We need to know what the world is talking about and ask ourselves questions and understand what is carbon emissions, what is abatement. All of those practical things are the first step. Then we need to say,
Mr. Taiwo seems to be frozen.
how do we make this
okay.
in countries? How do we make carbon business profitable? I believe it is just as profitable as agriculture for a place like Nigeria.
Oh, yeah.
Very profitable. We just need to look at it, understand it, and take action. And this is where I believe diaspora can actually make a difference, by bringing this knowledge base to the forefront for the benefit of all Nigerians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taiwo. Prince Akinwale, your concluding remarks or your call to action remarks.
Yes, thank you again, Dr. Alapo, for a job well done anytime. I think for me, it's just to, again, look at the importance of education of what we are doing, understanding them, and ensure that this starts actually very early with the young people. And interestingly, I'm going to give a very simple example here. One of our projects, the Diaspora Innovation Institute project, is actually domiciled in our Ondo State, Nigeria. We are actually at an high school And our goal even is to ensure that each time an high school student is actually celebrating their birthday, they will plant a tree. To us, it's a very simple way of, if they plant that tree, that means if the student is supposed to be in that school for 5 or 6 years, it's likely to be able to understand why the importance of that tree and see that even the trees grow over the period of the time is going to be in there. And by extension, other solution as well is using technology. And a friend of mine, I think Camille, is supposed to be on this call, he mentioned something about whereby we can use technology to be able to drive and get location where trees need to be planted and encourage people to really plant. How much does it cost to plant a tree, for instance? If we can customize that and itemize that in pricing, it will go a long way. So Dr. Alapo can say, hey, on my birthday, I'm going to plant 5 trees. So what is the commitment? What is the USD value? Maybe $10 to be able to do that in somewhere in an African country or somewhere in an Asian country. So we need to really keep this conversation on. The diaspora, like Tarique said, is a very, very important stakeholder in this. We have been able to understand how things have been done, and the ripple effect is going to be on our continent. So we can just stay by and just let this happen. When it happens, then it becomes so disastrous for us. Thank you again for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Before we end for today, I have a short 1.5 minute video for those who may be wondering what we've been talking about, why climate change action is important. So let us, I'm going to share my screen and then we can see this video on climate change.
Climate change affects all continents. We cannot stand back and watch its devastating consequences on the future. Today, climate change affects economy and people, communities and nations. Day by day, we witness how the ocean level rises and how climatic events become more extreme. Our industrial activities are currently producing the highest levels of gas emissions in history, resulting in an increase of 3 degrees Celsius in the Earth temperature this century. And you know the worst part? That this will affect our children directly, and the poor will experience the worst consequences. But the good news is we have solutions within reach. In addition to using renewable energies and urging the international community to adapt to an economy low on carbon, now is your chance to act. We want to improve education and awareness towards climate change and include mitigation policies and political strategies. We want to adopt urgent measures to fight climate change and its effects. Starting today, we're ending this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Peter Taiwo, for joining us today from Owerri in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Mr. Tarique Rashaud, for joining us from Houston, Texas. And thank you so much, as always, Prince Akinwale Ojomo, for joining us from Madrid, Spain. I'm Dr. Remi Alapo with Diaspora Innovation Institute, also with the City University of New York, and one of the co-organizers for this forum, Institute for Peace and Leadership. I want to thank you all for your contributions today, for sharing with us about climate change, dispelling the myth and sharing some of the realities of how climate change continues to affect us in our various communities and locations, various locations around the world, and also providing, the suggestions for our collective action, our individual action, and also what governments should involve their citizens in doing, or also what governments who have committed to the Sustainable Development Goal Agenda for 2030 have committed to. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and let us make climate change, think of it as a reality that is affecting us every day. And in our own small ways, we can work on an individual basis or collectively or partnering with other, entities to make climate change not something that will continue to affect the future of our children and of course ourselves. So with that, I would like to thank you all again and wish you all a happy Thanksgiving for those of you joining, here in the US. I hope that you have a nice
Thank
dinner
you, everybody.
with your
Enjoy the
families. Before we end, do you mind for us to please take a group picture? Prince Akinwale, can you facilitate that? I know you have a very good camera.
So I'm not sure. Okay, so you should be able to do it
Thank
because
you,
you are
Prince.
the one that is
You do
anchoring
next.
us.
So
Okay, hold on.
we'll
Let
wait
me
on
do
you.
it from
Yes.
my... Okay, Prince Akinwale, I think you got bumped off. Can you get
Okay.
back on?
Okay. There you go.
I still don't see you.
See you. Okay. All right.
Okay, there you are. All right, so let us
Yeah.
take a group picture on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'll take another one on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Climate change.
Climate change,
Climate
climate change.
change.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you so much, everyone, and see you next month on the next Diaspora Innovation Institute monthly webinar. We will be in touch with you about the guest speaker, the date, and the topic for that webinar next month. Thank you so much and happy Thanksgiving again.
Happy
Happy Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving.
brothers and
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.